And joining us in studio, Bongani More from the Higher Education Parents Association. Zwanele Mchwanti is from WITS SRC. We have Mcebo Dlamini, a student activist. And on the soft set, we have Bishop Malusi Mpumlwana from the South African Chamber of Commerce. On the line, Hugo van der Merwe is a Director of Research, Knowledge and Learning at the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation. Gentlemen, thanks so much for your time. Let's just start with Bishop Mpumlwana in the sense that why things have gotten to this point. Where has it horribly gone wrong?
Well, maybe it's a good time to say that it's from the South African Council of Churches, not Chamber of Commerce. Yes, I think that it is something that is long overdue. There's been too long that this campaign has been on, and I think that we should, especially as adults in our society, as parents, we've taken too long to listen. There is no debate, in my view, and in the view of a number of us, that the greatest investment a nation can make to its future is education. And therefore, education should take precedence. And it should not be a case where people have to fight long battles for it to happen. However, the debate has not happened properly because there has not been the space to properly listen to each other and engage. And I think what is happening at WITS this week that leads to what I hope will be an assembly of the university where they will all discover that they actually are on the same side. They want the same thing. They just need to listen to each other more. I understand that there is a lot of work being done this week in that direction with the assistance of the mediators. It is something that we at the South African Council of Churches are also mobilizing for in the different parts of the country with the assistance of the church leaders in every province to work towards bringing together the students, the fees must fall, and movement and the university administration to agree on what the real issues are, that education has got to be properly supported. But also, a very important thing that the students have raised is the decolonization of education. That's something that all of us should be happy to have as part of our liberation process. And this should not start at university, it should start at preschool, so that children can actually grow up with a better understanding of who they are as South Africans without colonization.
All right, Bishop Mpumlwana, just to engage the Higher Education Parents Association, Mr. More, in saying that if this chaos had perpetuated for so long, where were the parents, where were the alumni and elders that only intervened at this critical stage?
Yes, thank you very much. You know, throughout this process, there have been discussions in small corners by parents in terms of how they need to make an intervention in this process. But then we got to a point where we then said that it's important that we come together as a collective and try to participate in this process in a much more structured way. And we're confident that in the manner in which we were organizing ourselves and also interacting with the stakeholders, that will then improve the quality of the discussion and then will lead, you know, finally and ultimately to a lasting solution in our education system. Is
it more critical to save the academic year and perhaps put the free higher education demands on the back burner for that particular purpose?
I think, Cindy, when you asked initially from the bishop as to where it has gone wrong, it's particularly because we've come to say, you know what, guys, let's just put it under the carpet, we'll sort it later, you know? And that's basically one of the reasons, because I remember one professor was like, in fact, the questions that you students have raised today were the top questions in '94 when we were going into the democratic society. These were the top questions that you raised today. So for us to be put in a position where we are seen as hooligans that want to write exams is something that's touching, because we want to go back to class. It's important that we write exams. It's important that degrees are conferred this year. It's important that metrics come into the system. However, we can no longer wait. The struggle has gone for too long. It's true that people need to come and listen to the students, and there's a genuine call from the students. So we need to listen to each other and see if we can quickly save the problem and finish the academic year.
Yeah, but what spirit are you going into these negotiations, because you would have to concede certain demands that may not be able to be effected or given at this point? We know it's a process with the whole free education. At what kind of spirit are the students going to go into these engagements on Friday?
Well, I wouldn't say that we are going to negotiate. These are not negotiations. The time for negotiation is over. We've negotiated. We are going to a dialogue on Friday to raise the issues that the university has been sitting on top. We have two demands. We have separated the demands into the internal demands, the demands inside the university, and then there's the national agenda. The national agenda, we are saying to Adam Habib, he must take a position as a university. Where does he stand? It is not the role of the vice-chancellor to be a buffer between students and government, because now he's taking a hit that doesn't belong to him. So we are saying we can't have a vice-chancellor that acts as an agent of government, that defends and attacks students, sends police to brutalize students, to shut down a noble cause. Then those are the national demand. Then from there, once we take a decision, once he agrees that he's with the students, we will then take the fight where it belongs, together with the university, not as students alone, because we need the support of the academics, the professors, the bright minds, to say, let us now then take the fight to where it belongs, which is union buildings.
All right, let's get Hugo on the line from the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation. Mr. Fanamava, thanks so much for your time. Do you think by instituting or calling for more intense police and security on university campuses that this was a fundamental flaw or error on part of the university management?
I think it was very regrettable that it reached that point, because as we've seen in so many situations in South Africa where people are frustrated, where they've reached the end of their tether in trying to get a response, but when the police come in, it usually inflames the situation, and our police have, as it's become very clear, aren't sufficiently trained, don't have the capacity to engage constructively in many of these situations. So it is deeply problematic when it reaches that point. It's difficult to blame the university, but it is very clear that that is not a way that this situation is going to be resolved.
All right, we'll explore. We'll also explore how this then impacts, especially in going into a dialogue, something that is very critical in saving the academic year, where there is a level of distrust or a trust deficit. Bishop Mpumulwane, here, obviously, we're going to have to call on a sober-mindedness and you know, being able to listen to both sides. What do you think the environment needs to be that would enable this dialogue to be fruitful?
It has already started. The student leaders, the management of the university, and the mediators have been working together, and I believe that even as we speak, those conversations are ongoing with all the stakeholders. I do expect that by the time they come to Friday, they will have narrowed their differences as much as is possible ahead of that time, which is also part of the reason why the university suspended their program between today and Friday, so that they can work on those things, because it does take some time to bring everybody on board. I think the critical thing is to recognize that, in fact, even government is not at odds with this matter. I think people will remember that even the 2014 election manifesto of the ANC, I'm talking about the governing party, actually talked about free education. So it's not as though these are issues that everybody is not at one on in principle. The issue is, what timetable are we working on? What are the constraints? If there's an honest discussion, there is nobody who's going to be unreasonable. And I think that, unfortunately, the narrative that has been caused by the violence in the institutions has led to a situation where people actually think that the violence is actually the real issue, when it's a distraction from what is otherwise a very critical conversation to have. We should have listened to. We have failed to listen to it in good enough time. I also want to say that there are things that go beyond the financing of education. The thing I keep coming back to this issue, we have always in the past talked about education for liberation. If you remember, the slogans that were there in the 80s were liberation, education. And that's what the students are calling for, that it must be brought back to the table. That means we're dealing with the philosophy of education, which means we need to actually have a much bigger dialogue. That's why we're talking about a CODESA for comprehensive education, so that we must deal with every aspect of it in a meaningful, rigorous, and absolutely thoroughgoing way.
All right, we have a caller, Molefe. Hello to you. Thanks for your patience. And what's your view or question?
Hello, how are you?
Good, thank you.
I'd like to greet everyone there at the studio. Okay, you know what? I'd like to, say something. The issue of free education is not only about free education. I'd like to warn the state at large that, guys, please come on. Once now the students are planning to go national, we all know in the history of apartheid that most of the marches, they were victorious when coming to the national point of view. So the minute the students are going for national planning, they must be very, very careful. Now victory, that's where it's going to come in. And then all I want to say is I was at VET today after work. I passed there to listen to the speech and to hear the leaders what they had to say. What I'm saying is that when you say they want free and decolonized education, they must be very careful. Free education on its own, it's weight on the shoulders, and decolonization is another weight. Remember, some of the institutions, even today, the learners are still fighting one thing, to take Africans out as a medium of instruction on the doors and the direction within the campuses. Now, what I'm saying is, South Africa at large is a theater of strife because of the impatience. Transformation is lacking. You cannot say you are transforming. Today, if you can ask for at HR at VET, ask for statistics of the employees, you will check that majority are white people and then minority are black people. But the society at large is vice versa. So the issues of transformation, changing of languages within the institution, those are free education will come, right? Those other things will also arise until such point that the government itself recognizes transformation. I promise you.
Yes, we get your point. Thank you so much. So, Mr. More, are you also of the view that this is the broader consensus that needs to happen in the next 48 hours in terms of what the agenda points need to be, primarily when it comes to the deracializing, the institutionalized colonial mindset, if you will?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we as parents, of course, we're convinced that you cannot have the solution to the problems that we have in education unless there's fundamental transformation of our education system. Now, the question is, what are the priorities? How do we schedule our activities? And who participates, who does what? And those are the kind of heightened levels of discussion that we would really like to engage in. But of course, these are broader issues. But then each and every campus has its own specific issues that need to be focused upon as well. In other words, you have a global approach to these problems, but you also need to have a localized and specified attention to some of the detail that might be peculiar to particular conditions.
All right, maybe give us in summary what the detail needs to, that needs to be ventilated when it comes to. This is a 100-odd-year-old institution, and it was business as usual until the fees must fall or other activism campaigns. But what needs to be done in the immediate?
I think, for instance, the president was correct to say that when you see us on the streets, you must know that we've passed the step of negotiations. What 2015 October did was to bring back these questions that were once put under the carpet. The question of free and quality education, the access thereof, the decolonization of the curriculum and diversifying of the academia, and the coherent, inclusive education system that speaks to the people and to the funding thereof of the higher education system. So the dialogue or the conversation or the negotiations that we've had throughout the year were part of those. Decolonize the curriculum, increase student funding in higher education, accommodation crisis, and so forth and so forth. And that then comes down to the internal demands that we would have. For instance, HAPI being one of our internal demands, PKV and EOH residencies, decolonization of the curriculum, diversifying VET staff, building more residences. Those are the things that are specific to VETs.
Okay,
but those are the
to
conversations
just take a timeline,
we have.
Yes, and commitments going forward.
So I mean, in the issue, for instance, of free education, that's what we're asking for. We're saying that when are we implementing, when are we starting, when are we rolling out the issue of higher education? We are also understanding as students that when we speak about decolonization, it's another project of its own that's also costly, but it's something that we need to begin. For instance, with HAPIP, in his term, we've regressed in terms of transformation instead of going forward as the university. So those are the things that we're now going to say, hold on. This is not going right. We can't be going back in terms of diversifying the academy, in terms of decolonizing the curriculum, to make it sure that it speaks to the South African issues, it speaks to the African issues, but it also speaks to the global issues that we find ourselves.
We also have Pazania Pillay, organizer of #TakeWitsBack movement. Pazania, thanks so much for your time. Are you confident that lectures will resume come Monday?
I can't say that I'm confident about it. All I can say is that we hope lectures resume, and that's why we're trying to create awareness for our movement. It's not that we're against Fees Must Fall. It's not that we're against the right to education. We want to work with Fees Must Fall, with the university, to achieve our goals, but also keep the university doors open to currently enrolled students.
What is your view with the criticism that it's a minority of students that are protesting and therefore infringing on the rights of the majority who want to go back to class?
Look, in terms of numbers, we understand that the numbers do not reflect the entire body of students, but it does reflect 22,000 out of 37,000, and there's 77% of the majority of that vote. And shouldn't those students be acknowledged for their need to get back to campus to continue with their studies?
All right, let's take a caller. Joanne is in Soweto. Hello to you.
Yeah, I'm all right, my sister.
Very well, sir. What's your question?
I'm Joanne Simkun from Soweto. Hello?
We're listening.
Yeah, as a parent in a generation of 1976, I would like to put this thing. When you cross the line in 76, when we choose the machine to lead us, we decide that there is no more negotiation and dialogue. It looks as if we are dealing with a stubborn government that cannot listen to the student. If a government is not listening to the student, there is only one way. The only one way and the solution is a fire.
All right, thanks so much. I think that's where the students stand. But Hugo, now what needs to happen to ensure that the safety of staff and students on campus, with that the presence of police in safeguarding the property or whatever rationale management will have, what do you think in terms of dealing with the riot mob and the police's protocol? What needs to happen here?
I think the issue is there's no simple or short-term solution for this. We don't have a police who can respond effectively and in an appropriate manner with public demonstrations where people are angry, where people feel threatened. So I think the solutions really do need to come from confidence in the dialogue process. There's no security solution that's going to resolve this. And I must say I'm incredibly encouraged by the way that the other speakers have framed this as that the recognition for a need for dialogue to unpack the issues and to find common ground, because there clearly is amongst the various students and I think what we really want to see is the government also coming to this, because the government's role in resolving this, I think there's still a serious lack of trust and a lack of resolve in government in taking this seriously. I think when we saw in the communities protest around service delivery, the government did a cabinet reshuffle to make sure that the right minister was in that portfolio. We don't see that same kind of urgency from government when it comes to dealing with education in the longer term. And I think that's the kind of trust that we need to see from government to rebuild. Otherwise, we're just going from crisis to crisis, and the police are going to be caught in, and the situation is just going to go from bad to worse, unless there's a more integrated process of dialogue that includes all of these stakeholders.
All right, Hugo, thanks for that. Phoenix in Nelspruit, hello to you, and what's your comment or question?
Thank you for taking my call.
You're welcome.
I'm happy to know that everybody wants free education, but the only problem is this, that some of us want free education from a platter of gold. We don't want to fight for it. And some people are willing to sacrifice everything for free education. It's just like fighting for freedom. Some people are willing to fight with their life for freedom. And it's the same thing we are seeing here. People must not be selfish. People must be selfless.
All right, thanks, Phoenix. Bishop, in terms of one of our callers saying that the battle lines are drawn, and also using the analogy or example of 1976, that once you've passed a certain threshold, there is no turning back. So the sense is the frustration levels of students at such a point that the only way to douse or quell this is by conceding to the demands. In the event that this doesn't happen, what is the intervention going forward to at least maintain the peace and law and order?
Three quick things. The first one is that in 1976 you were dealing with students that were making a case against an undemocratic government. And we don't have that today. There is no reason to believe that, in a democratic society the government would not listen to a reasonable request, which is what the students have been. The problem, as I've said before, is that no one has listened. And because of that, we are now at a point of crisis. And our purpose now, between the parents' organizations, the churches, and all the mediators, is to say, oh, let's persuade the students to accept that their point has been made and we're hearing it. And that let's create the environment where that message can be taken to the levels of communication that government, which is a democratic government, will be able to listen to. That is my second point. The third point is that because this is a national campaign everywhere, we think that it ought to be the same spaces must be created in every university so that that university can then be able to agree on the things that are absolutely essential to be able to start opening to prepare for examinations, but at the same time be able to take forward the key things that now become not students' issues only, but the whole university community is agreeing that these are the matters that we're taking forward. And all of us outside of the university ought to give support and come alongside them as well as government to find workable mechanisms.
All right, Mcebo, just from the students' representative, what compromises are you not willing to make? In other words, what would be the deal breakers in this dialogue in the next 48 hours or so?
Well, look, we have compromised a lot since 1994. We are living in a compromised state. What more can we compromise more than what we demand now? I mean, there's no compromise here. It's either free education or nothing. And I am sorry, and I don't blame these white people who are saying they want to open the university. That's white privilege speaking. They don't speak for the black pain. They can't understand the black pain because universities from their inception were made for them. That's why they feel that today they will open and close because we don't matter to them. They don't speak to the 7,000 students that the university, if we open, won't be able to write exams. They don't care about those. But I'm saying to them, and that's if you look at the numbers of the white people who were protesting, that's the 77% that Adam Habib was speaking about. And if you look at the numbers that were brutalized by police yesterday, that's the 23%. The media will judge and the public will judge for itself.
All right, but are you willing to accept the moratorium on no violence on both sides? In other words, that when there are no violent protests, police will then be retracted? Mzwanele.
But Cindy, we were never violent. Students, at no point were they violent. Even yesterday, I mean, we were having such a beautiful march on campus, walking up the Yale Road, when the police started to throw stun grenades on us, you know, and then students obviously then started running away. And students react, when you see them throw a stone, they react to self-defense because the police are actually shooting with the rubber bullets, you know. Students have remained non-violent, have remained resolute in their call. They've made this call very clear, without any violence, to say that do not tamper with our call. So now we are happy that the university has decided to take police out of campus and the police are outside, and we actually don't want them to be outside the gates. They must be sure to go around the province to go those high crime zones because universities are very peaceful spaces where people contest ideas and they never fight. You never have seen a stone flying at vets until police were introduced to our campus. At vets we engage intellectually, we engage robustly. All we do is to just contest and exchange ideas. And that's what we want on our campus. That's all we want on campus. We don't want want violence.
And
And it comes with the police. It's them that bring it.
Yeah, so no police and negotiations can happen. I want to quote Vice Chancellor at Wits, Adam Habib, saying that he's grateful for the opportunity to hopefully reach a negotiated settlement. And of course, the primary concern is the 37,000 odd students that need to graduate. So, in your concerns, what is the primary achievable or attainable goal in the immediate?
We're confident that we can achieve, stability in institutions of higher learning. And that stability will then lead to the normalization of life in these institutions. That can only be achieved if, all the stakeholders on campus find each other and be able to then, clearly separate areas of agreement and areas of disagreement. And we support, we're also encouraged by, the students when they emphasize the issue of, the cross-pollination of ideas and that level of engagement. This is what we expect out of a university, an institution of higher learning. We want that to be brought back into this situation, and we think it's much more critical right now so that we can then be able to meet the objectives that we all share, because all of us want to see progress in our education system.
Correct. So by all accounts, it sounds like it will be business as usual from Monday, the 10th of October. And the student representation is like, no, well, we haven't quite reached that. So we can't say that with confidence. But I appreciate you coming in and sharing your insight. And thanks to Bishop Mpumulwana from the South African Chamber, or rather Council of Churches. And we have Bongani More. You can tell my mind is on finances. Yeah. Bongani More is the Higher Education Parents Association, Mzwanele, Mjwanti, Wits SRC, and Mcebo Dlamini, a student activist. And to you at home, thanks indeed for calling. And Penzania Pillay from the organization #Take Wits Back Movement, and Hugo Vanamerva at the CSVR. We'll be back just after this. Do stay with ANN7.